Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of What Authors Can Learn. It's a series where I highlight specific concepts from books that I've recently read, and we break them down into actionable takeaways for your own writing. Last video, we talked about a masterclass of first-person perspective and how show don't tell is more of a guideline than a rule with The Will of the Many by James Islington. Check out that video here. Today, we're talking about indie darling Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. Disclaimer, in this video I will avoid any specific spoilers, but I will talk about the overarching journey of Thomas Senlin. I personally do not think that anything I say here will lessen the reading experience. So, that being said, let's do this. This book was originally self-published by Bancroft, but it gathered so much interest and love from the fantasy community that the series was eventually picked up and published by Orbit Books. There aren't many self-published books that successfully make the transition to traditional publishing, but the Books of Babel series has done it. Here's a quick synopsis. Senlin Ascends is the first book in the series and our introduction into the ancient and mysterious Tower of Babel. It rises high into the sky and it's said to be so tall that its floors, or ringdoms, are countless. Each ringdom in the tower is like its own country with different climates and cultures and designs and purposes. And Thomas Senlin and his newlywed wife Maria come to visit the tower for their honeymoon. They're planning on traversing the first 3 floors of the tower to enter the ringdom called the Baths. It's full of hotels and spas and wine. And shortly after arriving, the newlywed couple gets separated. And as Thomas sets out to find his wife, he rises through the tower to the baths, meeting many different characters and learning that the tower is unlike anything that he expected. This book was a lot of fun and it had a very unique kind of atmosphere. I highly recommend it if you like things that feel slightly surreal and weird, but full of charm and personalities. There's a link below if you want to pick it up and support the channel at no cost to you. There is a lot that Senlin Ascends does well. The tower is incredibly fun to read, and Bancroft does a great job at hinting at details that lie just under the surface of what we see. But what Bancroft does best in the entire book is the character flip. The character flip is what I call the journey between the character that we know at the beginning of the book and the character that we know by the end. It's one of the most satisfying things to experience in a book, and it's why coming-of-age stories are so popular within all of fiction. We, as readers, like to see our characters grow. And when that character journey, or that character flip, is done well, then the characters feel realistic and the reader roots for those characters and every action and consequence feels so much more important. Today we're going to put together a framework that guides you through a successful character flip in your own stories. This framework is called the Senlin Flip Framework. And I put this together to give you a beat-by-beat journey that helps you create similar, satisfying character flips. Now, just like with a plot framework, it's not the end-all, be-all for your character journeys. Instead, it's a way to ensure that you are hitting all of those important moments, and then you can expand on them. I see plot frameworks all over the place, check these videos out, but I don't often see frameworks related to other things like character development or settings. If you know anything like that, then please let me know below. And as a quick note, the character flip can target any kind of trait or belief of a character. Readers like to see a character go from passive to active, from roguish to noble, or shy to bold. Or characters can also go the other way, right? They can be humbled or driven to do things that normal society would deem terrible, and that can still be an interesting and satisfying read. Let's start with breaking down the beginning and the finishing state for Thomas Senlin. Now, Senlin is a headmaster for a small fishing village, and he prides himself on calm authority, logical reasoning, and believing in the good of man. He wants to visit the Tower of Babel because he believes that it's this mecca of technology and philosophy and everything that he thinks is good. He idealizes the tower as the center of this sort of academic and noble lifestyle. He's a man of words and knowledge. By the end of the novel, Senlin is no longer disillusioned about the noble life at the tower. People have taken advantage of him, stolen from him, used him. Senlin understands that in order to survive the tower and to find his wife, he must play their game and he must win. That is the character flip. And there are so many aspects to this. At the beginning of the book, Senlin is simply waiting around for help to come. By the end of the book, Senlin is actively making things happen around him. At the start, Senlin is asking for help, relying on strangers to guide him the right way and tell him what to do. And by the end, he doesn't trust nearly anyone until they've proven that they can be trusted. All of this is a big change for a character. The important part is how the author guides the character through these changes so that the reader feels like the change is earned. Using Senlin as our guide, let's try to identify these major beats of his character journey. You can find the full-size image for this at my website, writingtheory.com. Check the link below for the image and a text breakdown of the framework. Hey, and while you're down there, subscribe. We start the story by getting to know Senlin. This exposes the reader to Senlin's worldview. The first step to a believable character is that we understand that there is reasoning behind the way that they think. We very quickly learn that Senlin is not only a logical, careful man, but he prides himself in those qualities. He's proud to be a logical and careful person. In fact, these defining traits often make Senlin think more of himself than others who don't have those traits. And that leads us to our framework. Establishment. The first step of our framework is establishment. This isn't just exposition. In Senlin Ascends, we aren't just told that Senlin has this kind of personality. Instead, we're shown these traits through every action and thought that he has. This sort of character establishment may take multiple chapters. It's not something that's just done in the introduction of the book and then is complete. The most important part of establishment is that we understand that the character's worldview is solid, it's earned, it's proven. Senlin supports this worldview with a couple different actions. The first action is that Senlin relies on a travel book to understand the tower. This travel book gives advice and guidance to visitors of the tower. However, we quickly learn that the tower that Senlin experiences is not exactly the same tower presented in that book. And instead of changing his understanding of the tower to reflect the world he is experiencing around him, he continues to make excuses and he continues to rely on that book. He's a man of knowledge. Outsider. Senlin quickly finds that he's in over his head. He puts faith in people around him that continue to take advantage of him. He trusts in the book while the people who live in the tower ridicule him for believing anything that the book has to say. It is continuously proven time and time again that he doesn't belong. The second step of the framework is called outsider. Our character must be shown that the worldview that they hold is at odds with those around them. They face pressure from their new surroundings to change. The important part here is that the character doesn't change, right? A worldview that is earned through a lifetime like Senlin's is not easily discounted. Simply being in a new place doesn't change your base instincts and beliefs and personality. During this part of our story, the characters should suffer due to their worldview. They're either too innocent or sheltered or honest or noble or trusting, all qualities that we consider to be good and true. The characters suffering and being an outsider in this world makes the reader want to root for them. Challenged. This pressure against our character's worldview must continue. Maybe it's constant and unyielding, or maybe it grows in strength. Whatever the case is, our character is already an outsider, and that's not going to change. When Senlin makes it to the tower, he immediately faces a world that he wasn't really prepared for. He suffers at the hands of the people within the tower, but he stays noble. And we want our characters to be somewhat hard-headed. If our characters change too quickly, then they feel fickle, and that change doesn't feel earned. Senlin resists the change that the tower imposes on him, even when people tell them that he will be eaten alive. Senlin holds on to his worldview. A little give. At some point, a smart character will realize that being an outsider makes their life harder. In the case of Senlin, he realizes the importance of blending in, and maybe more importantly, not standing out. This is a concession that he's willing to make. He spends some of his dwindling money on clothes that are more commonly found within the tower. He doesn't want to stand out as a tourist. I think that it's important for the character to make this sort of realization. Completely ignoring the pressures from around them might make your character seem unobservant or even obtuse. And this sort of yielding to some pressures, but not all, helps the reader understand that our character acknowledges the world around them, the world that opposes their own view, and sees value in some sort of compromise. It's also important to note that this yielding of pressure does not alter the core of our character's worldview. Senlin might change his clothes, he might adapt himself to more local customs and blend in, but he never stops believing that a rational and logical approach to problems is the correct solution. He never considers adjusting those core values of himself. Punished. Later in the story, it is important for our characters to be punished for their worldview. In the case of Senlin, it's him being unable to make any progress on finding his wife because he's run out of those reasonable and logical choices. He's exhausted all of his options in finding his wife. This step of the framework may last a long time. This is where our character really suffers because of their hard-headedness. But this is a critical step in the character flip because it sets up the next and most important part of the framework. Forced change. This is the moment of the character journey when the reader understands that the character must change. The character is forced into this. It's important that the character not be happy about this development. They're being pushed into something that goes against everything that they know. The reader must understand this so that the final stage of the character flip is more impactful. More on that in a moment. Within the forced change, the character must struggle with their dilemma. For Senlin, he's running out of money, he's running out of time, and he's mentally struggling with the fact that he may never find his wife. And then an opportunity is presented. An extra note here, Senlin throughout the majority of the book before this moment has been largely reactive. He reacts to the world around them. He moves when people tell him to move. He goes to the next floor of the tower because another character tells him when and how to. He's always reacting. He's a passive character. This forced change moment requires Senlin to become an active character. He must make his own moves. Over the course of the book, Senlin's worldview is challenged time and time again, and in each previous challenge, he's come out of it resisting change and continuing to believe in logic, reason, and the good of man. While he's resisted previous challenges, that does not mean that his resolve hasn't weakened. In fact, there have even been moments of doubt, moments where he's tempted to act a certain way and then his nobler instincts prevailed. This is the moment where the character has no more options and he goes against what he believes in. Success. This forced change needs to end in success. Our character, breaking from their previous worldview, needs to be rewarded for this. Otherwise, the character would just be reaffirmed that this sort of change was a mistake. There needs to be a reason why our character believes that breaking their worldview was the correct choice. And it makes future challenges more likely to result in this new behavior. Senlin goes against his worldview, and because of it, he is one step closer to finding his wife. He's past an impassable barrier because he was forced to change. New values. At this point, our character sees the value in this new perspective. Future challenges throughout the book are more likely to be met with this new worldview. We see the character's thoughts and words and actions are different from the beginning of the story. Senlin is forced to change in order to move further up the tower to find his wife. In doing so, he finally understands that the tower is a place of selfish endeavors and cutthroat personalities. This framework helps you ensure that a character flip is earned. It does not help you create deep and realistic characters, but hopefully it helps you make sure that your character isn't changing their core traits and values too soon or too easily within your story. To the reader, this is so much more satisfying. We see the foundation that your character's world is built on. We see them face adversity and struggle. We see them fight against these outside pressures, and finally, we see them change. These changes can be a character becoming more noble, more daring, more active, more willing to do what it takes to succeed. It can be anything. If you like videos like this, exploring characters and breaking down stories, then subscribe and join our growing community of writers. You can follow the link down below to my website, writing-theory.com, and you can find the full framework image. And as always, thank you for watching.